You ever walk into a room and feel like the walls are holding their breath? That's what my mother's studio felt like. It wasn't some grand sweeping space. No chandeliers, no polished marble. Just paint-stained floorboards, mismatched frames stacked against the walls, and her old record player in the corner that only worked when it wanted to. But to me, it was a cathedral. A place where grief didn't rot. It just waited, quietly, patiently, like her. After she died, I asked my dad not to change a thing. Just one room. One room that still smelled like her jasmine perfume and turpentine. One room where her spirit didn't feel so far away. And for a while, he listened. Even after he started dating again, he said, "That room's yours to keep how you like. Your mom would have wanted that." And I believed him. Until Cynthia moved in. Now, Cynthia is one of those women who says things like, positive vibes only, right before she guts you with a compliment so sharp it leaves a scar. She wears lavender like armor and drinks green smoothies while judging everyone who eats bread. She moved in with her throw pillows and crystal bowls, immediately renaming the kitchen her space and the living room neutral ground. But I was fine with that. I stayed upstairs, I stayed quiet, I stayed out of the way until the studio changed. It started small. One day the door was open and it was never open. A plant had been placed inside, sitting right on my mother's drafting table like some peace offering. The next week her paint jars were gone. The next, her rug. Then one day I came home and the room was empty. No warning, no discussion, no ceremony, just gone. I stood in that hollowed-out room, blinking at the beige walls, and all I could think was, how dare they make her disappear twice? I confronted my dad, his mouth open like he had something to say, but all that came out was air. Cynthia stood behind him, arms folded, looking at me like I was the problem. She said, "It was time to move forward. Clinging to the past isn't healthy." I said, "Erasing someone isn't moving forward. It's cowardice with a makeover." She didn't flinch. That was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't her being thoughtless. It was deliberate. She needed my mother to be gone, not just physically, but spiritually. Erased, forgotten. A chapter ripped from the book. Well, if she wanted to erase my mother, she should have double-checked who held the pen. They didn't even bother to box it neatly. My mother's journals, her handwritten thoughts, her sketches, letters to herself, to me, were dumped into a garbage bag and shoved out to the curb next to a half-empty bottle of Cynthia's oat milk and a broken yoga mat. I found them there at dusk, the sun barely touching the tops of the trash bins. I didn't cry. I just crouched down like I was tying my shoes and pulled the bag toward me, heart punching my ribs like it was trying to get out. The paper was damp, pages stuck together, her thoughts smeared. They'd thrown her away. That's not exaggeration, that's not metaphor, that's not poetic language. They literally threw her away. And do you know what my father said when I stormed inside, bag in hand, shaking with fury? He said, "Why didn't you take it sooner?" Like love comes with a pickup schedule, like grief has an expiration date. Cynthia chimed in, because of course she did. She always had the last word, even when no one asked for the first. She wouldn't have wanted you clinging to pain, she said, clutching her turmeric latte like it was a Bible. It's not healthy. Healthy. Let me tell you something about healthy. If your version of healing involves pretending a person never existed, you're not healing, you're sanitizing. You're painting over blood and calling it a remodel. I didn't argue with them. Not this time. I just nodded, slowly, calmly, like I agreed. Because revenge doesn't come loud, not the real kind. Real revenge is quiet, patient, surgical. That night, I stayed up late flipping through what I could salvage from the bag. I dried her journals page by page. I re-inked the smeared writing. And in one of them, tucked into the back pocket, I found a key. Not metaphorically, an actual rusted key. I knew that key. It opened the attic. The one place Cynthia hadn't touched yet. the one place that still held the boxes from when my mom had first moved in. The place where memories weren't on display. They were buried, packed tight, and left to breathe. So I went up. One box was labeled Studio Do Not Discard. Inside were photos, letters, even a small oil painting she never finished. But there was one more thing. A sealed envelope with my name on it in her handwriting. It said, "For when they make you feel like I was never real." I didn't open it, not yet, because now I had something better than grief. I had purpose, and I had a question for Cynthia. If she thought my mother was so easy to erase, what would she do when the house remembered her? Grief makes people uncomfortable. It lingers longer than they think it should. It doesn't wipe its feet when it enters a room. And it damn sure doesn't leave just because someone lights a scented candle and says, "Let's move on." After the purge, things went quieter, but not peaceful. Cynthia took it as a victory. She walked around the house like it finally belonged to her, started calling it our home, even though the deed was still in my father's name, and half of the furniture had my mother's initials carved on the underside. My dad, well, he folded like a lawn chair in a hurricane. Didn't look me in the eye much. Said things like, "Let's not live in the past," and "We all miss her," like it was a group project, and I just missed the meeting. But grief isn't a shared Google Doc. You can't co-edit it. You can't vote on what's kept and what gets deleted. No one checked in on me. The texts from cousins stopped. The invitations dried up. I became the problem, the one who couldn't let go, the one keeping the house heavy. At first, I felt like a ghost in my own home, but then something shifted. Because grief, when you let it settle, turns into something else. It becomes steel. It becomes memory sharpened into instinct. I started waking up earlier, cleaning out drawers one by one, finding scraps of my mother she'd hidden all over the house, a bookmark in a novel, a grocery list in the pantry, a scarf stuffed into a coat sleeve like she'd meant to come back to it. Each discovery made me quieter, not louder. Each one made me clearer. I stopped reacting to Cynthia. No more jabs, no more snapped comebacks. I let her think I was shrinking, that I was slowly fading into obedience. But what I was actually doing was reclaiming the space, not as hers, not as mine, as my mother's. And more importantly, I started making plans, because in that sealed envelope, the one tucked inside the attic box, my mother had left me something more than words. She'd left me instructions. And tucked behind those instructions, a notarized document I didn't expect. One that proved my mother never really trusted the world to do right by her legacy, especially not the man she married, especially not the woman who came after. It wasn't a letter, it was a trigger. I finally opened the envelope from the attic 2 days after Cynthia tossed my mother's journals into a trash bag, like expired leftovers. I dried them, salvaged what I could, and stacked them like scripture on my nightstand. But that envelope, I knew it would change things, and it did. The letter inside was short. My mother didn't ramble. She never did. Her words hit like cold water to the face. "If you're reading this, it means someone tried to erase me. I knew it might happen. That's why I left this for you. You were always the one who noticed the small things. Now you need to notice something bigger." And taped to the bottom, a folded legal document, one of those cream-colored official sheets with seals and witness signatures. It wasn't poetic, it was power, a codicil to her will. She'd changed it 2 months before she died, quietly, methodically, like she knew someone would eventually try to redecorate her memory out of existence. The document stated that her half of the house, the half she and my dad bought together, was to be passed directly to me. No contest, no loophole, no time delay. I didn't just inherit her grief. I inherited authority. I held it in my hand like a live wire. And that's when I stopped feeling sad. I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I didn't spiral. I smiled. And then I did what Cynthia never expected. I lawyered up. Not dramatic, no threats. I simply called Uncle Mark, My mom's older brother, a retired real estate attorney who once sued his HOA for trimming his rosebush. I met him in his office the next day. Same old briefcase, same crooked smile. He read the codicil, looked up at me, and said, "Well, damn, your mom always did play chess while the rest of us were watching TV." He made a few calls, pulled the property title, and confirmed it. My mother's half of the house was mine, not just sentimentally, legally. That night I didn't sleep, not because I was worried, I was planning, because this wasn't just about preserving a room anymore. This was about taking the house back. Cynthia thought she'd moved into a home. What she moved into was a battleground. And I had just armed myself. They say when you throw a rock into still water, the ripples tell you how deep it goes. Well, I just dropped a boulder, and Cynthia felt it all the way down. She must have sensed something had shifted. I didn't gloat. I didn't speak to her unless necessary. I just existed, confidently. And that alone, that scared her. Because women like Cynthia don't fear confrontation. They fear irrelevance. And I had stopped reacting. 3 days later, I came home from a run to find my bedroom door open. Now I never leave that door open. Ever. Call it superstition or trauma or just basic respect for privacy, but that door stays shut. Inside, my desk drawers were rifled through. One of the folders I kept notes in had been clearly disturbed. She was searching for something, and she found nothing, because I had already given everything to Uncle Mark. The next morning, my dad cornered me in the kitchen, coffee in hand, fake casual like he was in some 90s sitcom. "I heard you've been talking to lawyers," he said, not asking, accusing. I looked at him and said, "I've also been breathing. Want to object to that too?" His lips thinned. "Cynthia's worried." "Good," I said. "She should be." Now, let's talk about what Cynthia did next, because it was textbook manipulator. She hosted a dinner, not a peaceful, let's talk this out dinner. This was a curated performance with hand-selected guests. My aunt from Connecticut, 2 cousins I hadn't seen since high school, and even her life coach, a woman named Paige, who wore all white and kept crystals in her bra. The table was perfectly set, and in the middle of it all, Cynthia made her little speech. "I just want to restore balance in this home. We all need healing, not division." Translation? Let's pretend I didn't erase your mother's existence, and now I'm mad you're legally standing in my way. I let her finish. Then I stood, looked right at Paige the Crystal Oracle, and said, "Since we're talking about healing, maybe we can start by not breaking into people's rooms when they're not home." Cynthia choked on her wine, and that was it. The gloves were off. Cynthia made her move the following Sunday. A family meeting, she called it. Not a dinner, not a get-together, a meeting, like we were employees of some emotional startup. And she was the HR department with a God complex. She sent out the invites like wedding announcements, email, group chat, even a phone call to my uncle in Arizona, the one who once called her dollar store Gwyneth Paltrow behind her back. I knew the setup before I walked in. Living room cleared, circle of chairs arranged just a little too perfectly, bottled water on coasters, everyone sitting in the soft light like they were here for a cult debrief. She opened the gathering with this gem. "I just want to clear the air. There's been a lot of confusion and tension around the house, some legal tension, and I think it's hurting the family." Eyes flicked toward me, some concerned, some curious, some already bored and scrolling their phones. She went on, voice gentle like poisoned honey. "We've all been through a lot. I never wanted to replace anyone. I just wanted to love this home and be a part of healing it." That was her play, victimhood. She looked at me like she was auditioning for a tearful reconciliation scene. So I stood up, calm, no trembling hands, no fire in my throat, just precision. I pulled out the folder Uncle Mark had helped me prepare, a copy of the codicil, a notarized statement, the property deed showing my legal co-ownership. And one last thing, printed emails between my mother and her lawyer, proof that her wishes were crystal clear. My inheritance wasn't emotional, it was strategic, protected. I handed the stack to Cynthia. then looked around the room. I didn't come here to clear the air. I came here to clarify facts. This isn't about drama. This isn't about grieving too long or moving on too slow. This is about someone walking into a home and thinking they could repaint the past. Cynthia's face went white. My cousin on the far end whistled low. Someone whispered, "Sheesh." I turned to my dad. "You let her turn this place into a mausoleum for your guilt, but not anymore." I wasn't shouting. I wasn't begging. I was declaring. And the silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was earned. Cynthia didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just sat there, folding and unfolding the corner of the codicil, with her perfectly manicured thumb, like she was trying to make reality smoother. One aunt clapped. It wasn't dramatic. Just one solid clap like, "Well, damn, girl." And that's how the trial ended. No verdict, no yelling, just receipts. And the realization that I wasn't the one who needed to be healed. They were just uncomfortable because I remembered what they wanted to forget. The house felt different the next morning. Not lighter, not yet, but shifted. Like something had been put back where it belonged. Like a painting that had been hanging crooked for years finally straightened itself out. Cynthia didn't come downstairs for breakfast. She was still in the house, temporarily, but her presence had lost its weight. She wasn't walking through rooms like she owned them anymore. She was treading water in a pool she thought was shallow. I didn't speak to her. I didn't have to. Because that Sunday, something more important was waiting. The studio. I hadn't touched it since the purge. I couldn't. Not when it felt like desecration. But now it was time to put my hands back on the bones of that space and make it breathe again. I unlocked the door. It was still empty. Cynthia had seen to that. But emptiness can be beautiful when it means you get to decide what fills it. I started small. The paint-stained stool, retrieved from the attic. My mother's brushes, cleaned. Laid out like surgical tools. I opened the windows, let the breeze in. The light hit the hardwood floor the way it used to, pooling just beneath the windowsill like a memory trying to stretch its legs. I hung the unfinished canvas on the wall. The one I found in the attic, still smelling faintly of lemon oil and turpentine. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. It was hers. Every item I returned was like resetting a constellation. Not for nostalgia, for truth. Because my mother lived here, she created here. And no one, no matter how many throw pillows or peppermint diffusers they dragged into this house, was going to rewrite that. I didn't just restore the room. I remade it. And as I worked, I started remembering things she told me, half whispered while she painted. How she hated the smell of new furniture. How she always wanted to visit Tuscany but never made it. How she once thought about painting with coffee instead of watercolor just to see what memories tasted like. She wasn't just a memory, she was a map. And this room, this was the compass. As I placed the final frame photo, my mother, standing barefoot in the grass behind the house, brush in hand, hair wild, I realized I wasn't mourning anymore. I was guarding. And if Cynthia ever tried to cross this threshold again, she wouldn't be met with grief. She'd be met with walls that remember her trespass. It's time for one last truth to pass between father and daughter, something Cynthia should never have been in the middle of. Ready to hit the emotional core? Let's peel back the last mask now. This is the confrontation that's been building, not just with Cynthia, but with the man who allowed her to bulldoze over memory, love, and legacy. It's not an argument, it's a reckoning. He came to the studio the next day. I heard his footsteps pause outside the door, hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed in anymore. Good, he wasn't, but I left it cracked anyway. He stepped in and looked around like he was seeing it for the first time, which, in a way, he was. The room had always belonged to her, but now it looked like it. "I remember this easel," he said quietly, like we were in church. "She got it the year we moved in." I didn't answer. I just adjusted a stack of sketchbooks and waited. He sighed, that deep, practiced sigh that men like him use when they're gearing up to make themselves the victim. And then he said it, the line I knew was coming. I didn't think it would matter that much. My hand stopped moving. You didn't think erasing her would matter that much? I didn't erase her, he insisted. I just moved on. Cynthia was trying to bring some light back into the house. I turned to face him fully then. No more rearranging, no more polite distance. She didn't bring light, she brought bleach. She threw out her journals, I said. Do you even get how deep that is? That's like tearing pages out of someone's soul and stuffing them in the bin. She didn't know what they were. She knew, I snapped. She knew exactly what they were, and you knew what it meant when you let her. His eyes dropped to the floor like he expected to find forgiveness in the hardwood. I was trying to keep peace, he muttered. No, I said. You were trying to avoid discomfort, and you let her bulldoze the one part of this house that still had her fingerprints. There was a long silence between us, the kind that doesn't heal, it just marks the border where a relationship changes shape. And then I asked the question I'd never had the guts to ask before. Did you even love her, or was she just the chapter before Cynthia? His head snapped up. The sting of it was real now, but he didn't get to be the only one hurting. I loved your mother, he said. I just didn't know how to protect her memory without breaking Cynthia. Then you should have let her break, I said. Because not every relationship deserves to be salvaged at the cost of someone who's already dead. And that's when I knew my father didn't lose her. He buried her, then handed someone else the shovel. He didn't speak again, just looked around the room, eyes lingering on the brush set, the unfinished painting, the single photo by the window. Then he left, not a word, just absence. This time I didn't mind. Cynthia didn't go quietly. Of course she didn't. Women like her never exit without a monologue and a costume change. 3 days after the confrontation with my father, I came home to find Cynthia in the foyer, suitcase beside her, phone glued to her ear, pacing like a disgraced CEO leaving a boardroom. She saw me, hung up. Your father asked me to leave, she said. I didn't nod. I didn't blink. Good. She laughed. Not like she was amused, but like someone who'd just lost a bet they thought was rigged in their favor. You think you've won, don't you? This wasn't a contest, I replied. It was a cleanup. Her jaw twitched. You're just like her, she hissed. And there it was, the final insult, the one she'd been chewing on since the day she moved in and realized the ghost of my mother was harder to replace than she thought. Thank you, I said. She took a step forward. Do you know how hard I tried to make this place livable? For him? For you? I didn't ask you to, I said. Neither did she. Cynthia's face hardened. The suitcase handle groaned under her grip. She turned to leave, then stopped. Check your attic, she said, voice sharp as broken glass. Might want to make sure all your little memories are still where you left them. I didn't flinch. I already did, I said. They're documented, cataloged, and legally protected. I watched the light drain from her face. Also, I added, pulling my phone from my pocket. I have footage. You looking through my room, trying to access the safe. Not very light and love of you, is it? She didn't respond. Didn't need to. Her silence wasn't mystery. It was defeat. She pulled her suitcase out the door, heels tapping like a funeral march across the porch. No goodbye, no parting wisdom, just an absence that finally felt clean. I locked the door behind her, not because I was afraid she'd come back, but because I was finally allowed to choose who this house kept in. And it chose me. Next up, Part 10, The Inheritance. Time to end not with fire, but with something even rarer in revenge stories. Peace that was fought for. Shall we finish it? Let's bring it home, the final part. This isn't a scream of victory, but the exhale after a storm. The kind of revenge that doesn't burn bridges, but builds something sacred from the ashes. Weeks passed. The house stopped feeling like a battlefield. The walls no longer carried Cynthia's perfume or my father's shame. The silence had changed again, not the awkward kind, not the cold shoulder kind. This was silence that rested, that healed. I kept restoring the studio, not for nostalgia, but because it felt like building something forward. I even picked up a brush one night. Nothing fancy, just a small canvas and a color my mother used to call ghost gold, a warm yellow she mixed herself. It didn't feel like impersonation. It felt like invitation. One morning, a letter arrived. Not in the mail, on the porch, no stamp, no name on the front. Just my first name in my mother's handwriting. I froze. At first, I thought it was a leftover I'd missed, something from the attic or the studio drawers. But when I opened it, I realized it wasn't old. It was dated. The week before she died. Inside was a single paragraph. You won't remember all the lessons I tried to teach you. That's okay. You weren't supposed to follow me. You were supposed to survive me. If you're reading this, it means you did. And that means I did too. Folded inside the letter was a photo. Me as a child, asleep in her lap, paint smudges on both our cheeks. On the back, in black marker, legacy is not what you leave. It's who keeps remembering. I sat there on the porch, letter in one hand, photo in the other, and for the first time since she passed, I didn't cry. I smiled. That was the final inheritance, not the room, not the house, not even the legal deed or the boxes in the attic. It was this, the proof that she saw me, prepared me, believed I'd fight, and trusted I'd win. The kind of revenge no one expects, the kind where you don't just survive the storm, you become the sky it clears for.